And we are on with ABC News veteran and the creator and host of What Would You Do, Mr. John Quiñones. John, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Drew. Good to have you here with me.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you. So let's just jump into these questions. As you continue to accept speaking engagements, especially at colleges, recently you're face to face with audiences that grew up watching What Would You Do as children. I am included in one of those children. What has your experience been like as you interact with fans that potentially gain some of their moral and ethical reasoning from your show?
I just love the fact that younger audience in particular love the show. Everywhere I go, I can't run through an airport without even some kids as young as 8, 9 years old who've been watching it on YouTube, because we've been on YouTube all these years now. It's exciting. Young folks at colleges have ideas. They all want me to film on their college campus. And we ask usually the administration of these universities and colleges, and they'll say, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. And then they think about it and they say, well, maybe not, because they don't want their campus to come off looking bad on national television just in case somebody does the wrong thing. But I think it reminds us that the young folks care about ethics and morals, and they want to hold the older folks' feet to the fire. They love it that I bring up issues like, how do you come out to your parents if you're a young Hispanic kid in a very conservative or religious or macho household? The fact that we've opened the door to these conversations is really important to me, because I can't tell you how many times folks have come up to me and said, thank you for doing that. Because of your show, I was able to talk to my family about that, and whatever it might be. So it makes me feel good. And I'm so excited that we're bringing it back in the fall.
That's unbelievable that it has that much of an impact all these years later for these younger generations. For any young people who are looking to get into broadcast journalism, what advice do you typically give out these days?
Oh man, I love this profession. It gives us a chance to shine a light on a lot of issues that some people don't want to talk about or don't want to hear about or don't want to see on television. That's the beauty of being a storyteller, is that I call journalism the candle in the darkness. The journalist, he or she, imagine you're in a room and it's pitch dark, there's a storm outside, we can't see our hands in front of our faces. Well, the journalist, he or she, is the person with a little candle or the little flashlight, and they can shine it on the darkest corners of the room to illuminate injustice, to illuminate corruption or civil rights violations or human rights violations. I think when journalism is done right, those are the kinds of stories we should be telling. And I love that I've had the privilege all these years to be able to take that camera and that light into the darkest corners of the world. So I highly recommend this profession. And my advice would be, study as much as you can. Read as much as you can, watch television, listen to podcasts, go on the internet, get your news from all kinds of sources. The problem with today's generation is that we're all, the younger generation especially, is into this short form content, and that's the predominant medium. And I don't think that's good. I think it worries me. People there are no more newspapers around like there were when I was growing up. People under the age of 30 seldom have a cable television, so they don't have access to network news or 24-hour news channels. They wind up getting their news in short snippets online. And I think too often that doesn't give them a good read on politics in this country, on current events, no context, nothing deeper than a headline. That worries me a little bit. So my advice would be read as much as you can, listen to as much as you can, watch John Quiñones on TV, but also watch Lester Holt on NBC, Nora O'Donnell on CBS, and of course, David Muir on ABC. And just practice in front of a camera if you're going to go into television. I had a heavy Mexican accent growing up. I worked with a little cassette recorder, and I would record whatever I could get my hands on and practice and practice and practice. I joined the drama class in high school so that I would be forced to be on a stage and enunciate from the stage without a microphone and slow down my rapid fire speech, because I used to talk real fast, Mexican American in the barrio in San Antonio. All of that will lead to getting into college. And I went to Columbia University. I got a master's in journalism, which you don't always need. A lot of my colleagues don't have that. I wanted to be as good as I could. And don't give up. I can show you 50 letters of rejection that I got from local TV stations in Texas when I was getting started at the age of 26, 25, and right after college. No one would hire me. You just can't give up. You got to keep that dream alive.
Absolutely. Very well said. Absorb everything you can and just keep on pushing through.
Absolutely.
To go back to your point on short form content, one of the negatives that you did mention was the fact that you don't have the ability to go into details or give further context. You, as someone who's spent your life in long form journalism, what are some of the most exciting or fulfilling stories that you have gotten to cover throughout your career?
Well, most recently, ABC News made a commitment to go to Uvalde, Texas, the scene of that awful, awful school mass shooting, at Robb Elementary a year ago, more than a year ago now. We were able to set up shop. We opened up an office there. ABC relied heavily on me being there, very often, like every other week. That was unheard of. So that story, when we were able to give it that much time and resources, we were able to get incredible access to those families that were going through such heartache. 19 children, who perished in that mass shooting, and 2 teachers. That's been one of the most rewarding stories, because we've been able to keep law enforcement's feet to the fire and politicians in Texas' feet to the fire, asking questions. A lot of those families still don't have answers on exactly what happened or why it took law enforcement so long to take down the shooter at that school, more than 77 minutes after he started shooting. Why? It's been very rewarding for me and my colleagues, my producers, my camera crews, and other fellow correspondents to be there in Uvalde all this time, again, to shine a light on exactly what happened and try to get justice and accountability for those families who lost so many children and those 2 teachers. That's been one of the most rewarding stories I've covered. I covered Central America when I was starting in my career at ABC, because I speak Spanish. I went to Nicaragua, El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. That was my world. And that was fascinating to be able to cover civil uprisings and civil wars. And sometimes it was dangerous, but it was a great opportunity to bring American viewers the truth. And that's what we've always endeavored to do, is just bring you the truth, unbiased, as fair as we possibly could. And then I covered the Middle East. I mean, there's been I've been at ABC 40 years, and ever since I was 8 years old, Drew. So I got an opportunity to work with Peter Jennings and Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer, and I covered the world. So it's all been very exciting, and I'm still not done. I still love it.
That is unbelievable. Now, when you talk about covering the Uvalde shooting, I understand how that could be very rewarding, but is it difficult to spend so much of your time covering such heavy and especially difficult subject matter? How does that get to you as a reporter or even as a person?
Heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. I got to know the beauty of having devoted so much time to it, a whole year. We called it Uvalde 365. ABC made a commitment to stay in Uvalde and not cover this like we cover other stories, where we come in for a few weeks and then we leave to the next mass shooting, because God knows there's another one or another big story, and we kind of forget about those folks. We didn't do that with Uvalde. It was difficult. There were many times when I would be interviewing, a grieving family about the loss of their loved one, and I would be in tears. We needed to take a break sometimes and get away from Uvalde and then come back, later, a few days later. What you try to keep in mind, as difficult as it can be for the reporter, which pales by comparison to what those families are going through. What you try to remember is that, this might be a difficult interview for me to do, but the greater good that comes out of that is being able to bring it to the rest of the world, to show the heartache from that family, so that maybe we can prevent this sort of awful thing from happening again. Maybe, there will be some legislation that helps prevent, this sort of atrocity in the future. So that's what keeps me going, as difficult as it is. And it was very difficult for all of us. Many of us are parents, we saw our children in those victims. I saw my sisters in those 2 teachers. It is difficult, but again, the greater good that comes out of it is what might be rewarding, that maybe change will come so that this won't happen again, or the chances are lessened, because it's hard to say that it'll never happen again, because they're happening every other week, it seems.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. So that was a big part of your production schedule recently, but moving into your summer, you are spending your summer recording yet another season of What Would You Do? And I just wanted to ask, without giving too much away, what is something that audiences can expect for this upcoming season?
Well, there's so much new material that we have to work with now. This country is really divided on so many fronts. And we don't judge. When I go out there and we put the hidden cameras on folks, and then we come out and tell them it was just a show. I want to hear them out. I'm not saying, how dare you have said that to that person, but rather, why did you feel you had to take that stand on whatever it may be, bullying, gay bashing, discrimination, racism, someone being ridiculed because of the color of their skin or the accent of their voice or because of the religion they practice. We'll be doing a lot more of that. This country is really divided. Certainly, this is Gay Pride Month, and right now there are stores that are facing all kinds of backlash for simply selling clothing that it might, try to present a better understanding of the LGBTQ community. Very divisive right now. The issue of guns, is a real divisive issue. Even in Texas, where these awful shootings have occurred, there have been no legislation that would limit, for example, that would increase the age at which a young person can buy an AR-15 style rifle. So those are all issues that I think we can touch upon, and then just let the chips fall where they may and see how people react. And again, just present that to the American audience. So there's a lot of material that we look forward to filming. And we're going to do it in a different way. It's been 3 years since we last shot our last scenario. What would you do? So I think there are different ways, better cameras, smaller cameras, unique ways to approach the issue of how people react when they witness an injustice and the little voice in the back of their head says, do something. What will they do? I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. I can't wait to see what the new season looks like. As a question for the entirety of the production of What Would You Do? You have witnessed and reported on countless ethical and social dilemmas. In your opinion, what was the most challenging scenario that you've had to cover, and how did you approach it, and how did you react to it?
Oh man, there was so many. What strikes me, Drew, is that the people who step in and raise their voices and sound the alarm and lend a helping hand are usually the people who have been through it themselves. They are the most likely to step in because they know what it's like. They know the pain that sort of ridicule or discrimination can bring. Those are the ones I love most of all. When someone jumps in, and in every scenario, someone walks in who has a personal experience. For example, we're doing a young man bagging groceries, and he has Down syndrome. And the actor truly did and truly does have Down syndrome. He was very willing to take part in this because these are some of the awful things he's heard as he's bagging groceries. Like, why do you hire, these people? Why do you give them a chance? They don't know what they're doing. They're mixing the eggs with the bread and the bags. We had an actor, complain about that, the antagonist complaining about the Down syndrome child. And in walks this guy whose sister has Down syndrome. Unbeknownst to him, he thought it was for real. He didn't know it was a hidden camera experiment. And he so eloquently condemned the antagonist, the mean guy in our story, and it just brings tears to your eyes, the goodness of people who will reach out and help a stranger, but usually it's someone who has been through that themselves or knows someone or has a relative who has suffered through this. One of the most volatile ones we had was one we did where we had an ultimate soccer dad complaining, yelling throughout his little 8-year-old daughter's soccer game, condemning the coach, condemning the refs, and complaining and loudly and screaming. We told him not to curse and not to condemn and not to criticize the little players, but everything else was fair game. That was the most difficult because when I came out, people had not seen the show. It was one of the first ones we did. Folks started getting angry that I had captured them without because no one did anything. No one confronted the bully in in the stands. And maybe folks felt embarrassed about that. But when I came out, boy, they were angry at me. They took a swing at our camera. Our camera was shattered in pieces. They called the police. The little girls were running around, the soccer players running around crying and screaming. It was a mess. That one was really difficult to do. And in the end, we wound up not airing it.
I would say that, save for that last example, what would you do? Specifically, that example you gave of the Down syndrome actor. It's an inherently optimistic show. And I feel like a lot of people would say that news these days is pessimistic. Do you feel like you are an optimistic person?
Absolutely. First of all, I am a glass half full kind of guy. But we've also seen in every one of our scenarios, Drew, people step in. Sometimes it takes a long time. I think we all want to do the right thing. It's just that we're afraid sometimes, and it can be dangerous. I mean, how many times have you heard that a good Samaritan steps in and they wind up getting hurt? We never recommend that folks jump in and take on the bully. No, but we all have these things now. We all have cell phones, and we can call from a safe distance 911, or at the restaurant quietly complain to the general manager and say, look, this is what's going on over there. I find that women are better at getting involved. Maybe it's the maternal instinct, but by and large, women are the most likely to jump in, especially women from New Jersey. To jump in and sound the alarm. And that's so heartwarming. But even in those scenarios where no one steps in for a long time, at the end of the day, in every single one of our scenarios, somebody walks in and finally sounds the alarm and confronts the bully, or at least reports the bully's actions, and it just restores your faith in humanity in every one of our scenarios. So that gives me faith. I think we're out there trying to do the thing. We mean well. That's why it's so important. What we do often, and we see it happen with the show, we wait for someone else to step in or to sound the alarm, and then the rest of us will jump in, right? That's why it's so important that someone, it doesn't matter who it is, say something, because then other people, there's strength in numbers, I guess, and other people will join in. So that's heartwarming too. That's why it's so important that somebody sound the alarm.
Absolutely. I think we could all use a little more faith in humanity these days. John, it has been a pleasure interviewing you. Before we conclude, are there any last thoughts you'd like to leave our audience?
Keep doing the right thing. You know, when you witness something, put yourselves in the shoes of the victim. You know, it's as simple as the old biblical saying, you know, there, but for the grace of God go I, or, you know, putting yourselves in the shoes of the victim. When you witness an injustice and that little voice in the back of your head says, do something, there's a reason you're hearing that. Try to sound the alarm. And again, it can be in a quiet way from a safe distance, but say something.
Fantastically said.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, that has been John Quiñones. Thank you very much, Mr. Quiñones.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Drew. Good talking to you.